Welcome back to another episode. Wednesday, April 24th, 2014. What are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about what it takes to be a professional motorsports photographer, journalist, and car culture photographer. So, because I get asked this question a lot, what should I buy? How do I get involved? How do I get into events, things like that. So we may break this up into a multi-part series because realistically we could talk about this for hours and nobody's going to watch that. So let's get started with what is a motorsports or car culture photographer or videographer for that matter. Somebody who goes to these events and, in my opinion, documents the event in a storytelling fashion so that you, the audience, can get a feel for what it's like to actually be there. There's a lot of creators who will just push a button and it really doesn't tell a story. I am much more of a visual storyteller, along with trying to write articles in regards to what I saw, what I experienced, things like that. So, yeah, you start with the idea that that's what you're going to do. With that said, it's not an easy road. I'm going to tell all of you right now that being a motorsports or car culture photographer and doing it as a full-time job, you really need to sit back and figure out if that's what you want to do. It's not easy. There are not a lot of car culture and motorsports photographers that do this as a full-time job. There just aren't. It's not that the demand isn't there. It's long days, long nights, a lot of pre-planning, a lot of post-production. There's going to be nights when you're sleeping in your car. You're not always going to be staying at the Ritz-Carlton or the Hyatt or the Hilton. Especially depending on where the event is that you are attempting to document. So I'm not saying that to scare you guys off. I'm saying that because you need to know that right off the rip, this is not an easy thing. It can be very rewarding. You will meet a lot of great people. You will see a lot of great things. You will experience some amazing things. But there's a lot of work. Like, if you think that your 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job is entirely too difficult and you're spending way too much time working, being involved full-time as a photographer and or journalist within this industry is going to take up a lot more of your time than your current 9 to 5 job. That when you check out of, you don't have to worry about, where your next check is coming from, or, did you get those photos done? Did you take care of deliverables to a client? So there's a lot of things to think about, and there's a lot of cost involved. One of the most common questions as a photographer that I get is, what should I buy? What gear should I buy? It's kind of like asking somebody, should I buy a Ford? Should I buy a Chevy? Should I buy a Toyota? I mean, different strokes for different folks. And a hammer is a tool to get a job done, as a camera or a video camera is. And they all have different qualities about them. It also depends on if you were raised by somebody who uses a specific system, whether that be the systems that I'm going to refer to most of the time are going to be Nikon, Canon, and Sony, because those are really as far as still photography and even a lot of the video, at least in the motorsports and car culture, that's the big three. Obviously, there are some outliers, but those are the big three. So again, that's where the Ford, Dodge, Chevy, or, Nissan, Toyota, Mazda, whatever. People ask me all the time, well, what should I buy? You should buy whatever you feel comfortable with. You should, if you're going to buy any equipment, the first thing that I tell people is rent equipment from somebody like Lens Rentals. Rent equipment and see what you like. Sony, I can't use Sony. Their camera bodies are entirely too small. I have large hands. I am a large framed human being. And so I can't do Sony stuff. It's just too small for me. I grew up not really being into photography, but my dad was, and he was a Nikon. He shot with Nikon gear. So I think inherently I just was kind of drawn to Nikon. And that's how I got my start with Nikon. And once you're in a system, I know very few photographers who have bought in completely into a system and then walked away and changed system, whether it's going from Nikon to Canon, Canon to Sony, Nikon to Sony, whatever it may be. I know a few. I know one of my good friends, Mark, got rid of all his Nikon stuff and changed over to Canon. I asked him what the biggest difference was, and he said the extremely huge check that I had to write to get into Canon stuff. And as you progress in photography, you will realize how much it can cost you. So, to get started, first thing you need to do is you need to figure out what you want to do. Do you just want to go around to car shows and take photos and capture that stuff? Do you want to go on the road and follow a series or an organization? Do you want to just go to cool races and do photography? If you're going to take the leap to doing this, you need to be honest with yourself and figure out what your niche, if you're looking for a niche, or whether you're just going to be a broad spectrum of everything. Finding a niche is, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. A lot of photographers seem to get pigeonholed into a certain genre of motorsports or car culture, whether it's mini trucks, lifted trucks, drag racing, dirt racing, circle track. There's a whole host of things that you can get into. But what do you enjoy? Because what you enjoy will come through in the images that you're going to take. So figure out what exactly it is that you think that you would be good at and enjoy. Once you do that, do you know anybody in that industry? Do you know any photographers, any car owners, promoters, whatever it may be, to kind of give you some guidance? I was lucky because before I picked up a camera and started becoming a full-time photographer, I was in racing and in the car community for years and years before I ever picked up a camera and started doing this as a job. In fact, I used to race, so there was a lot of people I understood what it was like to be at the racetrack, the long days, the type of people that you're dealing with. I knew promoters already before I got into the actual photography side of it. It is not like it used to be. It used to be a lot more difficult to get credentials to a lot of events. Nowadays, I think that a lot of promoters, whether it's on the car show side, the race car side, whatever it is, a lot of promoters have finally started to see the, I don't want to say investment, but they've seen the return of letting photographers, even newbies, letting them into an event because of the publicity that it could potentially bring them. And that brings up another thing is there's a good chance that until you really get your branding going, you're going to be expected to pay your own way to get into these events, pay for your lodging. Like, it's great that you bought a camera. Now what? Nobody's just going to foot over thousands of dollars for you to go to events to photograph these events when you've got no social media following. You're not working or writing for an outlet, a legitimate media outlet. You're going to have to build your reputation. Some of that, I was lucky enough because I was in the community so long and I had traveled before to go racing. And I was around back in the days of internet forums. So people already knew who I was, had probably met me in person. But if you're new to it and people don't know who you are, if you just decided this is something that I really like and this is something that I would really try, you're going to have to go for it. But just know it's going to cost you money. You're going to have the investment money of buying gear. You're going to have travel, lodging, food, entry into the event. And honestly, when I first started, nobody was looking at my photos. Nobody cared. For the first year when I was doing this part-time, it was a struggle because I'm like, am I that crappy of a photographer? I mean, I look back at my photos that I took at that time and I'm like, those were not my best work, to say the least. But you keep working at it. Just like any job, you keep working at it to improve your skill set. There are very few that just have the skills to pick up a camera and absolutely crush it. But there are exceptions. I mean, I've seen some, I've even mentored some, that they pick up a camera and they have a great eye. So that brings me to emulating. There are a million content creators within the car culture and motorsports industry. Taking photos, doing videos. You see them all over social media. But here's the thing. Do you want to be like them? Or do you want to stand on your own 2 feet and have people recognize you for the work that you do without copying or emulating somebody? I mean, none of us are reinventing the wheel here. Let's face it. Especially when it comes to still photography. None of us are reinventing a wheel. Yes, there are different ways to edit photos and things like that. But again, your chances are you're not going to win a Pulitzer Prize for drag racing photography. Chances are. I'm just saying. So it's okay to look at other photographers' work and go, I really like that style. And you can even talk to them, and a lot of photographers will talk to you about how they go about things, how they do things. Doesn't mean you have to copy it, but at least you kind of start to get the groundwork for what you like. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily like the stuff that I do because I am a very I am very minimalist when it comes to the drag strip. Not a lot of editing, not a lot of artsy fartsy type of stuff. Much more journalistic style. So you have to decide what path you want to take. Not only do you have to decide what you want to do, you have to decide how you're going to do it, how you're going to afford to do it, and how you're going to present it. And when I say present it, I mean how are you going to edit your content and then present it to the world. One of the early things that you need to do as a photographer, and there's going to be, the professionals will agree with me on this. The ones that don't necessarily do this for a living like I do, they may disagree. Entirely too many content creators rely just on social media to build a following, host their content, whatever it may be. It's absolutely asinine. I would never, ever recommend that to somebody to just solely focus on social media. Social media is an added tool, whether you're talking about YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, whatever it may be. Build a website. They're not expensive. Places like Squarespace. Squarespace is what I personally use because it's not open source. I think there's too many ifs, ands, or buts with open source websites. So I like Squarespace. Never had an issue. Very cost effective. I think I pay, I don't know, less than a few $100 a year. So someplace that you can put your work up. Write some articles. If you want to get into this and you want to be serious about it, learn how to write. Everyone is so worried about writing. Guess what? It's not as difficult and it's not as scary as everyone makes you think that it is. What I mean by that is, can you tell a story? If you have kids and you tell your kids a story, it's the same as you telling a story in words to convey to your readers on your website. If you're going to describe X, Y, or Z, you were at this event and this is what it was like and this is what happened, and, draw the audience in and make them interested in it, that's a great thing. So all you're doing is storytelling. You don't have to have some, fancy English literature degree to be able to write stories when it comes to car shows or, auto racing at all. Because honestly, your core audience is not, most of them are educated, but they're not going to care if they don't want to read a story that sounds like it was written by Dickens or, Stephen King. Well, some of us may be interested in making it sound like Stephen King, but, literary people, write it like a normal human being and try to reach your audience as that person. So, just practice. Anytime you go somewhere, any event that you go to, a local car show, cruising, cars and coffee, a dirt track race, a drag race, whatever it is, write 1,000-word story about it. Guess what? Writing 1,000 words on a Word document does not take long. Be descriptive. You don't have to use huge words and everything else like that, but be descriptive and bring the people along on the journey with you. That's how you tell a story. So though that's something that I tell people to practice. But what about the photography part of it? The photography part of it, a lot of people overcomplicate. Yes, it is not easy. It is not easy to be a motorsports photographer. It's not easy to be a car culture photographer. I have done everything from Pikes Peak mountain climb to nitro top fuel cars to nitro pro mods, mini truck shows, lowrider shows, car audio competition. They all have their own challenges, and every venue has its own challenges because of lighting. You know, where's the sun coming up? Where's the sun setting? Where's the sun going to be during the day? How many people are going to be in my way when I'm trying to capture images? All things that you have to learn to work with and around. But how do I get started in understanding the basic principles of photography? So I will tell you, I am 100% self-taught with photography, and YouTube was my friend in the very beginning, and honestly still is, because doing photography and videography is a constant learning process. So I relied on others, and I'm talking years and years and years. This is probably 12, 13, 14 years ago, it seems like. Jared Poland, Frono's Photo. I watched a lot of his old videos and how he explains the light triangle and how everything works together and understanding a depth of field. So many of the basics I learned from him and others on YouTube. And I still watch YouTube for like studio lighting and things like that. I don't need to watch it for the basics anymore. I watch it for now much more the advanced stuff that I don't necessarily focus on in my everyday life as a motorsports journalist and photographer. So there's always something to learn. Situationally, there's always going to be something to learn. But again, I don't want anybody to be discouraged by the idea of getting out there. What I do want to tell you, especially if you're talking about drag racing, this is for people who may be interested in being a photographer within drag racing. Would you feel comfortable standing next to a guardrail as traffic on the interstate zips by you at 80 miles an hour? If the answer is no, you probably want to find a different field of photography to do. Because some tracks that you will go to have concrete walls, some have, barricades like you see on the side of the interstate. And these race cars are going a lot quicker than 80 miles an hour. And so if you have hesitation about your comfort level being that close to race cars as they're zipping by at maybe 150, 200 miles an hour, there's safer avenues, if you will. Drag racing photography is not for everybody, and motorsports photography in general is not for everybody. Even if you love motorsports, that does not mean that motorsports photography, or videography for that matter, is for everybody. It takes a special kind of not so right in the head type of person to do what we do. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't fault anybody for wanting to be out there or not wanting to be out there, or what their comfort level is. Everybody's comfort level is different. Some people don't feel comfortable driving down the interstate at 90 miles an hour, and that's why they sit in the right lane at 55 miles an hour. It's just their comfort level and what they feel that they can handle. Know your limits. There's a lot that we're going to go into. I'm going to make this a multi-part series because there's a lot that we can go into regarding all of this. And if you guys are interested, I'll definitely keep it up. And I, again, don't want to discourage anybody, but I also want you to understand the reality of things. You're not going to get rich doing this. I hope that people understand that. You're not gonna all of a sudden become, making, a healthy six figures or anything, being a motorsports photographer. That is far and few in between, and most of those are corporate gigs that you're dealing with large corporations. I know Larry has worked with some corporate sponsors. My buddy Mark Rebellious has worked with corporate, or you're working with large teams that have a very large budget. But if you're an independent, you're not gonna make a fortune. So keep that in mind. And you're gonna travel a lot. So you either better like driving or you better like sitting on an airplane, because you're gonna be traveling a lot. Unless you're just going out there to be the local track photographer, which is fine. If you're going out there to be the local track photographer, great. If you're going to pursue this as something that you're going to travel to all these different events, I do an average, because I like driving. Probably average 40,000 miles a year driving. And that doesn't include some of the trips that I do fly. So keep that in mind as well. It can be the greatest job in the world. The freedom that it provides you is great, but I'm not home a lot. Making a ton of money, it was never the goal for me anyways. I've got a master's degree, so if I wanted to make a ton of money, I would just go back into the normal, what I call real life world, or the real world, and get a real job. But you can make a living doing this, but don't think that it's going to happen overnight either. And don't quit your day job until you really think about where this is going to take you and how much you are willing to invest in it, not only monetarily, but of your own time and your own emotions and sanity, because this can stress you out to no end. Because honestly, when you leave the event or you leave the racetrack, your work has just started at that point. You've got a plethora of things to do once the event is over. Once you have gotten in your car to go to the airport or go home, that's when the work actually starts. I don't consider the standing next to the wall at the racetrack or walking around the fairgrounds at a car show. That's not the work. That's the enjoyment. The work comes when that is done, and now you have got to create the content out of what you have snagged already. The post-production, and that is a video that I will go over my entire post-production, how I do things, how I plan things out, and how I choose to post things on social media, things like that. But if you guys are interested, I'm going to try to keep these to like 30-minute type of things. If you're really interested, let me know in the comment section. If you guys are doing the audio, you can always feel free to drop me an email at damon@e3extreme.com. If you're on the YouTubes, and you like this kind of stuff, if you want to click the subscribe button, the like button, I mean, I greatly appreciate it. It's up to you. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you do, great. We'll keep doing this, and I hope that I can provide you guys with information that's worth listening to and watching. So, hopefully tomorrow I'll come back and do another one for you. But for now, just keep what I said in mind. And if you've ever got any questions, you can always reach out and contact me. I've mentored plenty, and I have no problem with continuing to do that. So I hope everyone has a great evening, and we will hopefully see everybody tomorrow. Take care.